Something came back. That's how all of these start, isn't it? Something came back from wherever it went. From the woods, from the water, from the stretch of road where the signal dies. Something came back. But here's the part nobody talks about. The thing that came back is usually better than what left. Kinder, calmer, more attentive. It remembers your birthday, it asks about your day, it holds your hand the way the original used to. Except it doesn't let go quite as fast. And you notice. You notice because it's your husband, your daughter, your friend. You know their weight, their smell, the specific way they breathe when they're falling asleep. You've memorized the original without meaning to. So when the copy shows up wearing the right face and saying the right things, but getting one detail wrong, one tiny detail, so small you can't even name it, you notice. You just don't say anything, because the copy is easier to love. 4 stories tonight. A father whose daughter walked out of the woods better than when she went in. A woman who accepted a ride from a man whose hands never moved. A wife who heard her husband's voice coming from inside the walls, saying things he hadn't said yet. And a hiker who found a missing person on a trail and realized too late that the trail had found him first. Settle in. And if someone you love seems different tonight, kinder maybe, more patient, more present, don't ask why. You might not like the answer. The daughter. My daughter went into the woods behind her house on a Saturday morning and came out 11 hours later, and she was fine. That's the part I need you to understand first. She was fine. Not a scratch, not a bruise, not a tear on her clothes. Clean, dry, smiling. 6 years old, and she'd been gone for 11 hours in October in the Appalachian mountains, and she came back smiling. The search started at noon. We live outside Hazard, Kentucky, on a property that backs up to a national forest. Real forest, not a park. Forest that goes back into the mountains for miles and doesn't care about you. We told Sophie 100 times, stay in the yard, don't go past the fence. She wasn't past the fence. She wasn't anywhere. Search and rescue came. Dogs, volunteers. I walked those woods until my legs were shaking and my voice was gone from calling her name. My wife sat on the porch and stared at the tree line and didn't speak and didn't cry, and I understood later that she'd already started grieving. Sophie walked out of the tree line at 6:47 p.m, right at dusk. She was standing at the edge of the yard like she'd been waiting for someone to notice. I ran to her, picked her up. She was warm. She smelled like pine needles and clean air and nothing else. Not mud, not sweat, not the sourness that children smell like after a long day. She smelled like she'd just had a bath. I asked her where she'd been. She said playing. I asked her with who? She said by myself. I asked her if she was hurt. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before. Patient, almost amused, the way an adult looks at a child who has asked a silly question. And she said, I'm better, Daddy. Not I'm fine, not I'm okay. I'm better. The deputy told us she was the most composed 6-year-old he'd ever spoken to. My wife squeezed my hand when he said it. Hard. Because composed isn't a word that belongs near our daughter. Sophie was loud and messy and afraid of thunderstorms and couldn't sit still for 3 minutes. Composed was someone else's child. The changes kept coming. She used words I'd never taught her. She said I'd prefer not to when I asked her to clean her room. She tied her shoes. She couldn't tie her shoes before Saturday. She'd used Velcro. I watched her fingers lace them up with a double knot. Fast and fluid, and my stomach tightened because I couldn't say what was wrong with it. It was just too smooth. The hand of someone who'd been tying shoes for years, not days. Sophie started talking about things that had never happened. A dog named Captain, a trip to Myrtle Beach, a conversation with my mother. My mother died before Sophie was born. She described the dog. Brown, medium-sized, a limp in the back leg. said she missed him, said he used to sleep at the foot of her bed and she'd put her hand on his back during thunderstorms to keep him calm. That stopped me. Sophie was afraid of thunderstorms. Before Saturday night, she'd come into her room crying every time it stormed. And now she was describing herself calmly comforting a dog during one, like thunderstorms were nothing, like they'd never bothered her, like she was remembering a different childhood than the one she'd had. Our neighbour Dale came over by the next afternoon. He was in the kitchen when Sophie walked in talking about Captain, how his leg was bad, how he liked to hide under the table during storms. Dale put the casserole dish down. He looked at me, then he looked at Sophie. That was the Hendersons' dog, he said. The folks that owned this place before you, Sarah and Tom Henderson. He paused. That dog's been dead since 2014. Sophie didn't hear him. She was still talking. Dale left without saying anything else, but the way he looked at Sophie on the way out, it was the same way Max looked at her. Our dog, our actual dog. Max hadn't gone near Sophie since Saturday. He'd been her shadow since she was a toddler, and now he stayed in the kitchen pressed against the far wall, tracking her with his eyes the way you watched a deer through the window. My wife broke on Tuesday night, 3 weeks in, lights off, both pretending to be asleep. She said, she called me Sarah. My wife's name is Rachel. She was half asleep on the couch. She called out, Sarah, can I have some water? Then she blinked and said, sorry, Mammy, like she'd corrected herself. That night I went to Sophie's room. She was asleep on her back. She never used to sleep on her back. She used to sleep curled up on her side with her knees pulled up. Now she slept flat, hands at her side, still, like something that had learned sleeping from a description. I stood in the doorway. I watched her breathe. Then she spoke, eyes closed, asleep. But a voice came out of her that didn't belong to a 6-year-old's body. Low, calm, adult. Not a child talking in her sleep. An adult talking through a child's mouth. It said our names. Mine, Rachel's, Sophie's, then the layout of the house. Kitchen is east facing. Bedroom off the hall. Back door doesn't lock properly. Dog sleeps in the kitchen since the 3rd week. I couldn't move. I want to be honest about that. My hand was on the door frame and my legs were locked and I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. And I stood there and I listened to something catalogue my family from inside my daughter's mouth. The voice was calm, methodical. It wasn't rushed. It had patience of something that knew it wouldn't be interrupted, that had done this before. It moved from the house to us, my work schedule, Rachel's sister's name, the brand of coffee I drink, what I said to my wife last Tuesday night when we fought about money, the exact words, my exact tone, quoted back to me from my sleeping daughter's mouth in a voice that was not hers. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe longer. I couldn't leave and I couldn't go in and I couldn't wake her up because I was afraid of what would look at me if she opened her eyes. Then the voice stopped. Silence. And Sophie rolled onto her side, her old way, the way she used to sleep, and mumbled, Daddy, in her own voice, small and confused and 6-year-old. I almost broke. I almost went to her. I almost picked her up and held her and told myself it was a nightmare, a parasomnia, a stress response, anything. But she hadn't opened her eyes, and the voice that said Daddy was hers, but the mouth was smiling. A small, patient smile, the kind of smile you make when something is going exactly the way you planned. I backed out of the room. I closed the door. I went to the kitchen and I sat down, and Max put his head on my lap and I held onto him because he was the only thing in this house I was sure was still itself. That was 6 weeks ago. Sophie is thriving. Her teacher says she's the most focused child in the class. She eats everything on her plate. She goes to bed without being asked. And every night the voice comes, reciting, updating, refining. Last week I heard it practicing Rachel's laugh. Not imitating, practicing. Running through variations, adjusting the pitch, the catch of breath at the end, finding the version that would pass. And 3 days ago, Rachel came downstairs in the morning and said Sophie had woken her up in the night. Said Sophie had climbed into the bed with her while I was asleep and put her arms around her and said, "I love you, Mammy." And Rachel had held her and cried because it was the first time since October that Sophie felt like Sophie. Rachel said maybe she's coming back to us. But I'd been awake. I'd been awake all night. Sophie never left her room. Whatever's in my daughter's bed has learned enough. The voice doesn't need to practice anymore. It can do Rachel's laugh. It can do Sophie's "I love you." It can climb into her bed and hold my wife and feel like her daughter, and Rachel can't tell the difference. And I think that was the point. The cataloguing, the rehearsing, the 6 weeks of practicing. It was building a performance so complete that even the people who love Sophie the most in the world would stop looking for the seams. Last night the voice said one more thing before it went quiet. Not our names, not the house layout, something new. He's still listening, but he won't be a problem. It knows I stand in the doorway. It knows I hear it, and it's decided that it doesn't matter because Rachel has already stopped looking and I'm the only one left, and I'm standing in a hallway listening to something wear my daughter's body, and I can't prove it. I can't stop it, and I can feel myself getting tired. The kind of tired where you start to wonder if maybe you're the one who's wrong, if maybe the voice is just a sleep disorder and the memories are just imagination and none of this means what I think it means. That's what it's waiting for. The night I stop standing in the doorway, the night I decide it's fine. I'm so tired. He's so tired. That's how it wins. Not with force, not with violence, with patience. 6 weeks of being better than the original until the only person still watching is too exhausted to keep his eyes open. The next story happens on a road. A woman whose car died on a Tuesday night, who accepted a ride from a man whose hands never moved on the steering wheel, and who found out too late that the ride never ended. The ride. I got into a truck with a man I didn't know on Route 7, outside of Grayson, Kentucky, and I need to tell you what happened next because I don't think the woman who got out of that truck was the same woman who got in. My car died on a Thursday night, late, after 11. The engine didn't sputter, just stopped. Lights, power, everything gone. I coasted to the shoulder, turned the key, nothing. No signal, no houses, just road and trees and silence. I sat for 10 minutes. Nobody passed. I started walking. The truck came from behind me about a quarter mile down the road. Old headlights, yellowish and warm. It slowed down. The window was already down. Older man, 60s. Flannel shirt, baseball cap. He asked if I was alright. I told him my car died. He said he was heading to Olive Hill and he could drop me at the gas station. I hesitated, then I got in. He looked like every uncle I'd ever had. The truck was warm and he said his name was Earl. 15 minutes passed. I didn't recognize the road. I asked how much further. He said almost there. 25 minutes. No landmarks, no town. I said I think we might have passed it. He said almost there. Same tone, same inflection, the exact same words and the exact same rhythm as the first time. I looked at my phone. No signal. The clock said 1:47 a.m. I'd gotten into his truck at 11:30. Over 2 hours. I could only account for 25 minutes. The rest was warm and gone, like I'd fallen asleep without sleeping. I looked at Earl. Same smile. Exactly the same. Not a variation. The same configurations of muscles in the same positions. A photograph of a smile. And his hands. They had not moved. Not once since I got in. 10 and 2 locked. No adjustments. No shifting grip. No scratching his face. Hands on the wheel in a position that looked correct but never changed. The truck turned. A slow curve to the right. His hands didn't move. The wheel didn't move. We turned away. The warmth. I thought it was the heater, but the air from the vents was cold. The warmth was coming from the seat, through my jeans, through my jacket, not mechanical warmth. Body warmth, the temperature of skin. The seat was warmed the way a living thing is warmer. My hands were shaking. I could feel my heartbeat in my wrists. I looked at the door handle. The truck wasn't going fast. 30, 35. I could open the door and survive the fall. I reached for the handle. My hand stopped. Not because I decided to stop. My arm locked. Every muscle from shoulder to fingertip clenched and held. 3 inches from the handle. I could see my fingers trembling with the effort. I was pulling as hard as I could and my hand would not move. The warmth from the seat spread. Up my back, into my shoulders, into my neck like something wrapping around my spine from below. Not painful. Gentle. The way you'd hold something you were absorbing. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. The warmth had them. I could see them. My jeans, my boots on the floor mat, but they were somewhere else now. They belonged to the seat. I looked at Earl. He was looking at the road. Almost there, he said. I tried to scream. My mouth opened. No sound came out. The warmth was in my throat. It tasted like copper and soil and something older than both. I could feel it behind my eyes. A pressure, a presence, something settling in. I don't know how long that lasted. It could have been minutes. It could have been the rest of the night. The warmth held me, and the truck moved, and Earl smiled, and the road kept going, and I was aware the entire time I was being taken apart and put back together, and the version that was being reassembled was not the same as the version that had gotten in. I came to on the shoulder of Route 7, standing 200 yards from my car, 4:15 in the morning, no truck, my keys in my hand. My car started on the first try. It had been completely dead 4 hours ago. Now it turned over like nothing had happened. I sat there with the engine running and I didn't know what to do with that. I drove home. I sat in the shower. The water was hot and I couldn't feel it. Not on my skin, under it. Under my skin, everything was still warm. The truck's warmth settled in like a second bloodstream. 3 days later, a mark on my neck, behind my left ear. Small, round, pale. Warm, the same warmth as the seat. I showed my husband. He said, "That's always been there." I said I hadn't. He said, "No, Katie, you've had that since I've known you." He was certain. He'd seen it 100 times. He'd kissed that spot. He said it was just a birthmark. Last week I drove past the spot where my car broke down. Same stretch of road, Route 7. There was a woman walking on the shoulder, no car, no flashlight. I slowed down. I rolled the window down and said, "Do you need a ride?" I didn't decide to say it. My mouth opened and the words came out the way Earl's words came out. Easy, warm, practiced. The warmth in my chest pulsed when I said it, like a heartbeat, like approval. She got in. I watched my hands settle on the steering wheel, 10 and 2. I felt them lock, and I said, "Almost there." Almost there. And somewhere on Route 7 at 4 in the morning, another woman is going to wake up standing on the shoulder of the road, with her keys in her hand and a mark behind her ear that her husband swears has always been there. The next story happens inside the house, inside the walls, where a woman starts hearing her husband's voice coming from the plaster, saying things he'd said yesterday, then things he'll say tomorrow. The voice in the wall. I started hearing my husband in the wall on the second week after we moved in. Not muffled through drywall, his voice at full volume, clear, present. Speaking from inside the plaster and lathe of our living room wall like he was standing in the wall cavity 4 inches from my ear. We'd bought the house in Gilmore County, West Virginia. Old place, 1920s. Marcus had grown up in a house like it. He said old houses feel alive. He said that like it was a good thing. The first time I was in the kitchen, Marcus was at work, 20 minutes away. His voice came from the wall beside the refrigerator, mid-sentence. Something about the gutters, that the front gutter was pulling away from the fascia. He said that to me 3 days earlier, word for word at dinner. The voice was perfect. His inflection, his cadence, the way he said fascia, like it has 3 syllables. I put my hand on the wall. I could feel it vibrating, not like a pipe, like a throat. I pulled my hand away. The voice stopped. It came back every day, always when I was alone. Marcus's voice, one sentence at a time, always perfect. The lag got shorter. Days became hours, hours became minutes. I heard it say something he'd said that morning. I left my keys on the dresser, while his car was still pulling out of the driveway. It was catching up, and then it got ahead of him. Wednesday afternoon, the wall said in Marcus's voice, "I think we should have your sister come visit." At dinner, 8:15, Marcus said, "I think we should have your sister come visit." Same words, same inflection, same pause between sister and come. I sat across from him and every part of me went cold because the wall wasn't repeating him anymore. He was repeating it. It happened again the next day and the next. The wall would say something in the afternoon and I'd sit at dinner knowing what was coming, watching his mouth, watching the sentence build behind his eyes, watching it arrive. I couldn't warn him. I couldn't say, "Don't say that." The wall already said it. So I sat there, every night, listening to my husband speak words that something else had already written for him. And the worst part wasn't the words. It was his face when he said them, the little spark of an idea arriving, the slight satisfaction of a thought that felt like his own. He didn't know. He had no idea that the thing in the wall had loaded the sentence into him hours before he opened his mouth. 3 weeks in, bed, dark, Marcus asleep beside me. I could hear the wall, not from the kitchen anymore, from right there, the bedroom wall, 8 inches from my head, murmuring half-formed sounds, going over consonants, practicing the texture of his voice the way a musician practices scales. Then it said something Marcus had never said. My name, not the way Marcus says in a conversation. "Erin, come look at this." Not functional. It said my name the way you say a word when you're tasting it, slowly, feeling the shape of it. Erin. Erin. Over and over. Getting closer to the way Marcus says it at night in the dark when it's just us. The intimate version. The private one. I lay in bed and listened to something 8 inches from my husband's skull, learning how he says my name when we're alone and I could not move. My body was rigid under the blankets. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth ached. I could feel tears running down my temples into my hair, and I couldn't wipe them because if I moved, if I made a sound, it would know I was listening, and I didn't know what would happen if it knew. I don't know how long it went on. An hour, maybe more. Erin. 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 Each one closer, each one more like him, until the last one was perfect, indistinguishable, and when I found the perfect version, it stopped. Silence. I lay in the dark and I waited. Then Marcus rolled over. His hands found my hips, his mouth close to my ear, and he said my name, softly, in the dark. The way he always says it, and it was perfect. The same perfection. The exact same perfection that the wall had landed on 30 seconds ago. The same placement of stress. The same breath. The same warmth in the vowel. I flinched. His hand was on my hip and he said my name and I flinched and he felt it. He pulled back. "Hey, are you okay?" I said I was fine. He hasn't said my name in the dark since. I think he's afraid to. I think he felt me flinch and decided that whatever was happening between us, the safest thing was to stop saying my name at night. And the wall has gone quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The way a thing goes quiet when it's finished learning. Last night Marcus came up behind me in the kitchen. He put his arms around me and he said something into my hair, softly, the way he does, and my body went rigid. Every muscle, because I couldn't tell if the voice was coming from his mouth or the wall behind him. He felt me tense. He let me go. He stepped back. "What's wrong?" he said. I looked at him, my husband, his face, his eyes, his voice. He sleeps on the other side of the bed now. He doesn't reach for me. He doesn't say my name. The distance between us grows a little wider every night, and he thinks it's because of something he did wrong, some way he failed. And I can see it hurting him. And I can't explain, because how do you tell the person you love that you can't hear their voice anymore without hearing something behind it? We're still married. He's still here. He still loves me. And I will never be sure it's him. It didn't take her husband. It took her ability to believe him. The man is right there, unchanged, untouched, still himself. And she'll never know. The wall just needed to learn his voice well enough that she couldn't tell the difference between his mouth and its surface. And now every word he says sounds like it might be coming from the plaster. The last story tonight takes place on the Appalachian Trail. A solo hiker, a friendly stranger, and a missing persons flyer with the wrong date and the right face. The hike. I need to tell you about a man I met on the trail before I tell you about the flyer, because the order matters. If I'd seen the flyer first, I wouldn't have spent 2 days walking beside him. I wouldn't have shared food with him. I wouldn't have sat across from him at a campfire and told him about my divorce and watched him nod and listen with the kind of patience that makes you feel like someone actually cares. I would have run. October, the Appalachian Trail, north of Hot Springs, North Carolina. Solo trip, late season, the shelter was empty. Day 2, the shelter at Rich Mountain. 4 in the afternoon, a man was already there, sitting on the edge of the platform eating an apple. Mid-30s, dark hair, green rain jacket, broken in boots. He saw me and smiled and said, "Hey." His name was Chris, from Tennessee. He was section hiking the trail in pieces. He'd been out for about a week. He seemed normal, easy to be around. We ate dinner together, we talked. Trail gear, weather, then the other stuff. The stuff you tell strangers in the woods because honesty feels cheap enough to spend when you'll never see the person again. I told him about my wife leaving. He listened, nodded, said he'd been through something similar. Said the trail was the only place that felt the right size for the kind of hurt that doesn't have edges. I remember thinking, this is a good person. I'm glad he's here. On day 3 we hiked together. Reached the next shelter late afternoon. I went to the information board. There was a missing persons flyer. Orange paper, faded to pink. A photo, a description. I looked at the photo. The man in the photo was Chris. Same face, same dark hair, same green rain jacket. Missing since October 2019. 6 years ago. Last seen at the shelter on Rich Mountain. The shelter where I'd met him the previous afternoon. I turned around. Chris was sitting on the platform 20 feet away. Same expression. He said, "That's a sad story." Not that's weird. Not do I look like that guy. The way you'd say it about someone who had nothing to do with you. I said, "This looks like you." He tilted his head. Lots of people look alike out here. The trail does that. I didn't sleep. I lay in my bag 10 feet from him and I listened to him breathe and I stared at the ceiling. and my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my sleeping pad. 10 feet. That's how close I was to whatever he was. Close enough to hear him shift in his sleep. Close enough to hear him whisper. He whispered. Around 2 in the morning. Not words. Sounds. A low, steady murmur. Like someone going over notes. Reviewing, and the murmur I heard pieces of conversation from that evening. My words. The things I told him about my family. About the apartment. About being alone. Played back in my voice. Not his. In my voice. Coming from his mouth. A perfect reproduction of things I'd said 3 hours ago. He was memorizing me. I lay in that bag and I listened to my voice come out of his mouth, and every instinct I had said, run, get up, run now. But my body understood something my brain hadn't caught up to, that if I moved, he'd know I was awake. And I didn't know what would happen when he knew you were listening. So I lay there, eyes closed, breathing slow, performing sleep while something 10 feet away rehearsed my voice in the dark. He was gone in the morning. Sleeping bag, boots, jacket, gone. His pack was still there. The clothes inside were brittle, dry rotted, colours fading, stitching coming apart. These were clothes that had been packed 6 years ago and never touched. The food was expired. Every item. Protein bars from 2019. At the bottom, another flyer. Different person. A woman. Blonde. Missing since 2015 on the same section of trail. Last seen at the shelter near Hot Springs. On the back, in handwriting I recognised, because it was mine. A single line. She seemed nice. We hiked together for 3 days. My handwriting. My way of crossing the T. The loop on the lowercase e, written on a dead woman's flyer in 2015. I had been here before. I had met someone at that shelter before, and I had written that note, and I have no memory of it. Not a gap, an absence, a place where a memory should exist and doesn't. Something was taken from me on that trail in 2015 and replaced with nothing. And I walked off the mountain and lived 10 years without knowing a piece of me was missing. I drove home. I sat in my apartment and I noticed it. Not right away. It took a few days. But people started tilting their heads when I talked. My sister said I sounded different on the phone. She couldn't say how. My barber, a guy who's cut my hair for 10 years, called me by the wrong name, then corrected himself, but looked unsettled for the rest of the appointment. Like something in my face had shifted just enough to confuse his hands. I am not the same person who went up that mountain. Something was taken from me. Not in 2015. This time I was awake for it. This time I sat across from the thing and told it everything it needed, and it listened and it took what it wanted and left me here. My voice sounds thinner to my own ears now. My reflection looks like a photograph of myself rather than myself. I reach for memories, and they're there, but they feel second-hand. Like I'm reading about my own life instead of remembering it. Something that used to be behind my eyes, something that made the world arrive in colour, is gone. And the space where it was doesn't ache, it just echoes. He's still out there, at a shelter with his pack, eating an apple, waiting for the next person to need someone to talk to. And he'll smile, and he'll say hey, and he'll be the best company you've ever had on the trail. And you'll walk off that mountain and you won't know you're lighter until someone who loves you looks at your face and can't quite find you in it. Can't quite find you in it. A daughter whose father can feel himself getting too tired to keep watching. A woman whose hands lock on a steering wheel and whose mouth is saying words she never chose. A wife who flinches when her husband says her name because she can't tell if it's coming from his mouth or from the wall behind him. And a hiker who sat across a campfire from something that took a piece of him he'll never be able to name. Something came back in every one of these stories, and in every one the thing that came back was better. That's the part that keeps me up. Not the wrongness, the improvement. The fact that the copy outperforms the original every single time. Kinder, calmer, more patient, more present. And the people who love the original start to wonder if maybe the copy is enough. If maybe the copy is what they wanted all along. And one by one, they stop looking for the seams. This has been Voices from the Vale. Same fire, new shadows. If someone you love is better tonight than they were yesterday, pay attention to that. That's not always a good thing.